He thought it was just another routine bus ride, until a little girl's whisper shattered everything he thought he knew about the world. On a rainy Thursday evening, David boarded the 87B bus headed downtown. Tired from a long shift at the community center, he just wanted to sit, close his eyes, and drift into the silence only public transport offers. The bus was unusually full for that hour. He found one empty seat near the middle and settled in. That's when he saw her. A woman in her early 30s climbed aboard, holding the hand of a young girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. The mother looked exhausted. Her daughter, wide-eyed, curious, hugging a stuffed rabbit like her life depended on it. They were soaked from the rain. Her boots squeaked softly on the floor with every step. Without hesitation, David stood up and offered his seat. The woman smiled, grateful. "Thank you," she said softly, as her daughter climbed into the seat, legs too short to reach the floor. David nodded, stepped back, and grabbed a pole near the rear door. Then, it happened. The little girl leaned toward her mother, cupped her tiny hand around her mouth, and whispered something. David didn't hear the words, but he saw the mother freeze. Her smile vanished. She looked at him like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes went wide, lips slightly parted. She clutched her daughter's hand tightly. What did the girl say? David's heart skipped. Was it about him? Was she scared? Was something wrong? He glanced at them again, wondering if he should ask. But something told him to stay quiet. The atmosphere around them shifted, suddenly tense, almost electric. That single moment changed everything. And it gets even more unbelievable. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to hear from you. What do you think she whispered? Was it a warning? A secret? A name from the past? Drop your guesses in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, if you're already hooked, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. It helps this channel reach more amazing viewers like you, and trust me, you won't want to miss where this story goes next. Because what happens after this? It's something David, and you, will never forget. And if you've ever experienced a moment where a stranger's words or actions left a mark on your life, whether beautiful or haunting, tell me your story in the comments. Let's make this space one where stories connect us all. Alright. Ready to find out what that little girl said? Let's go deeper. David wasn't always the type to give up his seat. A few years ago, he might have just looked away, buried his face in his phone, and convinced himself someone else would do it. But something inside him had shifted recently, something deep. It all started the day his mother passed away. She was the kind of person who couldn't walk past anyone without offering a helping hand. If she saw someone struggling, she stopped. If she heard someone crying, she listened. And David? He never really understood her softness. Not until she was gone. After her funeral, David found an old notebook tucked away in one of her kitchen drawers. It was filled with handwritten quotes, notes, and stories about strangers she'd met, moments she said gave her faith in people. One quote, in particular, was circled over and over: kindness is never wasted. It always makes a difference, even if you can't see it. Those words haunted him. He started looking at the world differently. He noticed the tired eyes of the grocery store clerk. The sighs of overworked waiters. The homeless man who smiled even when no one looked his way. David realized just how invisible people had become to him. So, he made a quiet promise, to be more like his mom. At first, it was small things. Letting someone go ahead in line. Buying an extra sandwich to hand to someone on the street. Offering up his seat on the bus. But that seat on the 87B bus? That wasn't just about kindness. David had just come from a shift where he'd helped mediate a conflict between two teenagers. One of them reminded him of his younger self, angry, impulsive, hardened by things no kid should go through. It left him emotionally drained. He kept hearing the words of one of the boys, "Nobody cares, man. We're just noise." That line clung to him. Like a shadow. So when the mother and her daughter boarded, something in David told him, be visible to them. Be someone who sees. He didn't know their story. He didn't even expect a thank you. But offering that seat? It was his way of saying, you matter. David's transformation wasn't overnight. There were moments he doubted it all. He'd hold the door open and get no thanks. He'd give change to someone only to see them mocked by passers-by. It felt pointless sometimes, like kindness was a one-way street. But then, every so often, something happened that reminded him of why he made that promise. Like the woman who burst into tears when he gave her a warm meal. Or the kid who stopped fighting just because David listened without judgment. One moment, one human connection, that's all it took to keep him going. And on that rainy Thursday, as the 87B bus rocked through puddle-filled streets, David had been thinking about how far he'd come. He was no hero. Just a man trying to heal by helping others. A man trying to carry on his mother's legacy. But healing isn't linear. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one whisper, to unravel everything. Because the past? It never really stays behind us. It waits for the right moment to remind us that some stories aren't over. Not yet. The moment David gave up his seat wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost unnoticeable in the shuffle of passengers and the hum of the engine. But for him, it was intentional, an act with weight. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know her story. But he saw her. And he saw her daughter. That was enough. As he stepped aside, she gave him a soft nod, the kind people give when they're too tired to speak but want to acknowledge something good. Her daughter, barely reaching the top of the seat, looked up at him with curious eyes. For a second, David smiled. It reminded him of simpler times. The bus pulled away from the stop. Rain streaked across the windows in patterns that looked like vines. The city blurred into a gray-blue canvas. The usual noise, beeping crosswalks, car horns, the occasional cough, faded into the background as David watched the pair in silence. The girl fidgeted with her rabbit plushie. She kept glancing at him, as if trying to remember something. Her mother sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap. Every few moments, her eyes darted to David and then away. That's when the little girl leaned in to whisper. But let's pause for a moment, not on what she said, but what David felt in that instant. You see, kindness often opens doors, but it can also open wounds. Standing in that bus aisle, David was flooded with a memory he hadn't thought about in years, a rainy day when he was the child, soaked and scared, clutching a stuffed toy as his own mother guided him onto a crowded bus. A stranger had smiled at them back then. He remembered that man's face, not fully, but enough to know he'd never forgotten the warmth. Could this be one of those moments, passed forward like a baton in a relay race of humanity? The bus jerked slightly as it turned a corner, pulling David back into the present. He glanced out the window. They were only a few stops away from where he'd planned to get off. But now, he wasn't sure if he should. The mother still hadn't spoken. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her purse. She blinked rapidly, clearly fighting back emotion. David shifted his weight from one foot to the other, unsure what to do. Should he ask if everything was okay? Would that be too forward? He looked again at the child. She was now watching him, directly. Not shyly, not with curiosity, but with certainty. Like she knew something he didn't. And in that stillness, with the sound of windshield wipers rhythmically scraping across the glass, David realized something strange. He felt seen. It was like standing on a stage without knowing you'd stepped into the spotlight. This was no ordinary bus ride. And what came next would prove it. The girl's whisper had changed everything. The air between them felt heavier. The mother wouldn't look at him now. The girl, though, she kept her gaze steady. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the child had just said something silly, something innocent. But David couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. There was a strange familiarity in her eyes. Not just recognition, but awareness. Like she was trying to piece together a puzzle she'd seen before. And the way her mother reacted? That wasn't random. That was shock. David started to wonder if they had crossed paths before. Had he met the mother years ago? Was the child adopted and repeating something from a photo or memory? His mind raced through possibilities, none of which made sense. And yet, everything felt connected. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. He hadn't done anything heroic. All he did was offer a seat. But in a world so busy, so distracted, sometimes the smallest gestures carried the deepest echoes. And this one? This one was about to echo louder than he ever could have imagined. What did she say? That question replayed in David's mind like a broken record. Over and over. As the bus rolled forward, he felt trapped in a suspense that thickened with every stop. The mother hadn't looked up since the whisper. She sat rigid, her hand now resting protectively over her daughter's knee. The little girl, though, continued to glance at David, more deliberately now. Not shy. Not playful. Like she was trying to send a message he couldn't decode. David cleared his throat, unsure whether he was trying to get their attention or settle his own nerves. He considered speaking. But what would he even say? Excuse me, but, what did your daughter whisper just now? That would sound insane. And yet, his heart was pounding. Finally, unable to take it any longer, David took a small step closer. Is everything all right? He asked gently, addressing the mother. She flinched. Slowly, she raised her head. Her expression was tense, worried, yet searching. There was something haunted in her eyes. Then she said, "She recognized you." David blinked. "I'm sorry." She said, "You look exactly like the man in the photo." Silence. David's mind struggled to catch up. What photo? The woman swallowed hard. The one on our fridge. He felt a chill. Why would there be a photo of me on your fridge? She hesitated. The little girl chimed in quietly, as if offering clarification. The picture with the boy and the rabbit. Mommy says it's magic. David felt his stomach drop. A picture of a boy and a rabbit? He hadn't heard those words in years. Decades ago, his mother took a photo of him in the park. He was holding a small white rabbit plush, the same one the little girl had. He remembered crying that day after he lost it on the way home. His mother printed that photo and put it in her scrapbook. It was never shared. Never posted online. It was private. Sacred. How do you have that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The mother looked even more stunned now. Wait, you mean, that's you? David nodded slowly. His hands were shaking. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she scrolled through a gallery, finally landing on an image and turning it toward him. There it was. The photo. Him, as a child. The rabbit. The same hopeful smile. He stumbled back a step, breath caught in his throat. This was mailed to me, the mother said. No return address. Just, sent one day. A few years ago. I kept it because. Well, something about it felt important. And ever since she was a baby, my daughters always pointed at it. Said it made her feel safe. David couldn't speak. He didn't know what this meant, how it was even possible. But one thing was clear, this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Why did she say it was magic? He asked, finally. The girl grinned. Because whenever I feel scared, I look at the boy in the picture, and I feel better. Like he's going to help. David felt something break open inside him. A mix of awe, fear, and something he hadn't felt in a long time, purpose. The mother was crying now, quietly. I never knew who he was. I just thought, maybe it was someone trying to send hope. David nodded slowly, tears now stinging his own eyes. I think, maybe it was my mom, he whispered. The woman stared. What? She used to say kindness echoes. That it always finds its way back. He looked at the girl. And there it was, that unshakable connection. The rabbit. The photo. The whisper. A stranger had become a symbol of comfort to a child. A child had unknowingly returned a memory to a man who had forgotten his own light. The universe doesn't deal in accidents. And for David, that moment reconnected something he didn't even realize had come undone. The bus rolled on, but time seemed to pause. Outside, the storm continued, lightning briefly lit up the skyline in flashes, echoing the electricity that now buzzed silently between the three of them. David sat down on the nearest empty seat, stunned. He wasn't sure if his legs had given out or if he simply needed to feel grounded, physically. The emotions swirling inside him were too many, too fast: grief, wonder, disbelief, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. The little girl turned in her seat, still clutching her rabbit, and leaned toward him slightly. "You're the boy in the picture," she said again, softer this time. "I knew you'd come." Her voice wasn't eerie, it was warm. Familiar. David looked at her and saw not just a child, but a bridge to something lost and maybe, just maybe, found again. The moment had shifted. David wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a thread, woven into the story of this mother and her daughter long before today. And now, he needed to know how. The mother took a deep breath, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I wasn't going to say anything. It felt too weird. Too random. But now that we're here, I think maybe you're supposed to know." David nodded gently. "Start wherever you want." "My name's Rachel," she began. "And this is Lily." Lily smiled, still hugging her rabbit tightly. Rachel continued, "I got that photo 5 years ago. I was pregnant with Lily at the time. And alone. Her father. Well, he didn't want to be involved. I had just lost my job. I was scared, broke, and thinking about moving back in with my parents across the country. Everything felt hopeless." David listened closely, feeling each word land like a quiet knock on a door he didn't know needed opening. "One day, I checked the mail. There was no return address. Just my name on a small envelope. I opened it, and inside was that picture. A little boy with the softest eyes, holding a rabbit just like this one." She looked at Lily, who was still gazing at David with a knowing calm. There was no note. Nothing explaining why. But the moment I saw it, I cried. I can't explain it, it was like something shifted. I didn't feel alone anymore. David felt goosebumps. I pinned it to the fridge. Every morning, I'd look at it before facing the day. And when Lily was born, she was drawn to it. Even as a baby, she'd crawl up to the fridge and giggle at it. Rachel paused. She started calling him the brave boy. Said he made her feel safe, even though she didn't know who he was. David looked at Lily. She beamed. "Mommy says he was sent by someone who cares." "She's always been incredibly intuitive," Rachel added. "Sometimes she says things that stop me cold." David's chest tightened. "Did you ever try to find out who sent it?" "I did," Rachel admitted. "I showed it to friends, searched online, nothing. No one recognized the boy. No metadata, no tags, no leads. Eventually, I stopped trying. I just let it be what it was." "And what was that?" She smiled, bittersweet. "A reason to keep going." The weight of those words hung in the air like fog. David tried to imagine his mother mailing that photo. Maybe years before she died. Maybe knowing someone out there needed it more than he did. It felt like something she would do. The rabbit, the photo, this bus ride, it was all part of a story bigger than any of them. Rachel shifted in her seat. "When Lily whispered to me, I didn't believe her at first. She said, 'That's the boy from the fridge.' And when I looked up and saw you," David swallowed hard. "It's like looking at a ghost," she finished softly. "But not in a bad way. In a meaningful way. Like something lost had been returned." Lily leaned in. "You were meant to find us." He didn't know what to say. Only that something inside him agreed. They rode in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. A silence full of answers that can't be explained, only felt. Finally, David asked, "Can I take a picture of that photo?" Rachel handed him her phone. He stared at the image, then snapped a shot with his own. Looking at it now, knowing it had traveled from his mother's drawer to this family's heart, felt like touching something sacred. "I think my mom wanted you to have it," he said. "I think she did too," Rachel whispered. And in that moment, they weren't just passengers on a bus anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle that had waited years to be placed. David stared at the image again, this time with a new kind of reverence. He realized it wasn't just a photo, it was a lifeline. Something that had connected the lives of people who were never supposed to meet, and yet somehow, did. Rachel seemed to sense his thoughts. "I used to talk to it, you know. Silly, right? But back then, I didn't have anyone. So every night I'd whisper to the picture, just little things. Like, please let tomorrow be better. Or, I hope I'm not failing. And somehow, the next morning, I'd feel strong enough to get through the day." David smiled faintly. "My mom used to say photos could carry energy. She said memories held power if you believed in them." Rachel nodded slowly. "I believe that now." Lily chimed in with a giggle. "I always tell the brave boy when I have good dreams. Maybe he's the reason." And in that moment, David felt more connected to the world than he had in years. Maybe kindness does echo. Maybe his mother knew that a simple photograph could carry a kind of magic no one could explain, but everyone could feel. The air on the bus was thick with meaning, like the silence after a long-awaited truth finally reveals itself. David sat across from Rachel and Lily, still trying to absorb everything. He had boarded that bus as one version of himself, and now, he wasn't sure who he was walking off as. Rachel reached into her bag again and handed Lily a small juice box. She didn't say anything, but the way she smiled at her daughter said everything. There was relief now. Closure. Maybe even peace. David looked down at the photo on his phone. His child self stared back at him, frozen in time with the rabbit clutched tightly in his arms. That smile. He barely remembered being that boy. But somewhere deep down, he could still feel him. "You know," he said slowly, "I lost that rabbit the same day that photo was taken. I cried for hours. My mom tried to cheer me up by saying maybe someone else found it and needed it more." Lily grinned. "Maybe that someone was me." Rachel and David exchanged a look. No words were needed. The universe had done its work. The bus began to slow again, pulling up to another stop. An elderly man stepped on, shaking off the rain. David instinctively stood up and offered him his seat. The man smiled with surprise and thanked him before settling in. As David stepped back, gripping the pole again, he felt something settle in his chest. Not confusion. Not fear. But clarity. His mother was gone. That would never change. But what she stood for, what she lived by, was alive. In him. In Lily. In the strangers touched by a photo and a whisper. Rachel turned to him. "Would you like to join us for dinner?" David paused. It was such a simple offer. But it meant everything. He nodded. "I'd love to." Lily beamed. "We're having spaghetti." David laughed. "Perfect." The bus turned a corner, and for a brief moment, the setting sun broke through the storm clouds. Light poured in through the windows, golden and warm, casting long shadows that danced along the seats. David closed his eyes for just a second. And for the first time in a long time, he felt full. Full of purpose. Full of connection. Full of the quiet understanding that life isn't just made of the moments we plan, but the ones we never see coming. The ones that whisper to us when we least expect it. The kind that start with a photo. A rabbit. A girl's voice. And the kind that remind us, we are never truly alone. Even when we think we are. Especially then. As the bus continued down its route, David looked around at the other passengers, faces he hadn't paid much attention to before. A teenager scrolling through music, a mother rocking a sleeping baby, a man in work boots staring blankly out the window. Each one living a story, carrying unseen burdens, hoping for quiet miracles of their own. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all. We don't always need to understand why things happen. We just need to trust that kindness is never wasted, that sometimes the impact of a gesture travels far beyond what we'll ever see. Rachel gently rested her hand on Lily's back. "You know," she said, glancing at David, "I think Lily's been waiting for this day longer than we have." David smiled. "Maybe we all have. We just didn't know it." Some stories don't need a grand ending. Sometimes, they just need a quiet moment, a shared glance, a whispered word, a seat given on a rainy day, to remind us that we're all connected in ways we might never fully understand. David didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, he wouldn't eat alone. He wouldn't go home wondering if his kindness ever made a difference. He knew, in the deepest part of him, that it did. And that photo, the one sent years ago, without a name or message, had traveled through time and circumstance to find its way home. To connect two families. To prove that even when love is gone, it's never really lost. So the next time you see someone struggling, or someone smiling, or just someone, remember this: every small act matters. Every person holds a story. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is a whisper. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What's one moment of kindness you've never forgotten? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you never miss a story that just might change the way you see the world. Because sometimes, the smallest stories carry the biggest hearts.